Hello students, and welcome to another lecture. For the rest of the course, we'll be covering the mediums, starting with drawing and then moving on to painting, printmaking, sculpture, architecture. Today we'll do drawing, and drawing is one of my favorite mediums, one of the mediums that I practice the most often and teach the most often. One of the great things about drawing is just learning to see how light hits an object, learning to understand how you can use different lines, how you can shade objects, how you can observe things and see them more closely. And drawing is one of the most fundamental aspects of all art. Whether you're making a sculpture or you're making a movie or you're making a print, they almost all start with drawing, some sort of drawing. Drawing to plan it out, drawing to discover the composition, drawing to work through your ideas, as we'll see with Leonardo da Vinci. Drawing is an essential aspect of the creative process and goes all the way back to the beginning of our origins. So please enjoy this lecture on drawing mediums. Thank you. So let's begin with drawing, media and processes. And the first one we'll do is drawing. William Blake said, "A painter or engraver without drawing is an imposter." So drawing is a fundamental skill. We learn to draw before we learn to write. It's primal, it's basic. Shapes and forms are on a surface are what drawing is, usually made of lines. Drawing can be used for many different things: to define ideas, to plan for larger projects, to record visual observations, for a final artwork in and of itself. So drawing is thinking, and there may be perhaps no better example of a draftsman than Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci used sketching for so many different things. He filled numerous notebooks with drawings, diagrams, writings about his life. He used them for an interdisciplinary approach. He explored a wide range of topics, including anatomy, botany, or engineering, and artist sketches often combined elements of art and science. He used a mirror script, so he wrote most of his notes from right to left, which can only be deciphered by holding a mirror. The reasons for this unconventional writing style remain a subject of debate. They contain various anatomical studies, parts of the body. He would dissect bodies and corpses, and he greatly advanced the field of study from his documentation of the body. The heart. He made a fake heart and pumped wax through it to see how the heart worked. He was very interested in botany, and he made a lot of detail in plant species in remarkable detail. His interest in botany is evident in his botanical illustrations. He was an inventor and engineer. He filled sketches of machines and devices for various purposes, including flying machines and hydraulic machines. He also made crossbows and war weapons. This one's giant. There's a guy. Hydraulic machines. He loved to fill his sketchbook with animals and figures that were practice pieces. He also loved to draw grotesques. He would carry little notebooks with him to the town squares where he could quickly sketch up people's faces in characteristic fashion. Here's some preparatory drawings for the Last Supper. Many of Leonardo's notebooks are scattered across various institutions and collections. Some of the most famous notebooks, such as the Codex Lancaster, have been acquired by museums and institutions and are periodically put on display for public view. Picture of some of his notebooks. I actually wanted to see the Vitruvian Man. I traveled to Venice, Italy to see it, and I went to the museum where it was held, and I asked where it was, and they said it's only on display every number of years, and it won't be on display for a very long time, so I missed out on that one, but still enjoyed Venice. You can break drawing into wet and dry media. Dry media is pen, pencil, colored pencil, charcoal, pastel, crayon, silver point. In a pencil, the pencil is made usually out of graphite and clay mixed together, and then it's squeezed into the wood and it's baked. The wood is soft enough to sharpen, but not soft enough to break. So here's a little diagram of how a pencil is created. Starts out as a block of wood, cut into each of these pieces. That's when the lead is going to be smushed in there, and then it's eventually cut and colored. If you see a B, H, or F on a pencil, usually an art pencil, the B stands for blackness, the H stands for hardness, and the F stands for fine point. And if it's an 8B, you'll get a very, very dark pencil. If you get a 2H, so a very hard pencil, it'll show up very light, because if a pencil is soft, the lead will come off easy, and if a pencil is hard, the lead will not come off easy. Color pencil is wax and pigment, but it looks similar to a pencil. This is, I have a video for you to watch on a color pencil artist who makes incredibly hyper-realistic pencil drawings. Charcoal is another form of dry media. Charcoal comes in compressed charcoal or willow charcoal. Charcoal is made from heating twigs or willow vine to high temperatures in an enclosed vessel without oxygen. And then compressed charcoal is powder that is held together with a gum or wax. When you work with charcoal, you can use the different kinds: compressed, vine, there's white charcoal, there's soft and hard charcoal. Just like with pencils, you have a hardness with charcoal, so you can get soft charcoal that comes off really, really dark, or light charcoal that gives more of a broken edge. The paper that you use with charcoal is also very important. When you draw with charcoal, this is sort of the process that you may work in if you're doing a portrait in a classic academic style. You outline, sort of draw out your major shapes, and then you smear in your values, and then you'll take your eraser and you'll start to carve out different areas where light is, and then go in with your darker charcoal and redefine certain things like the eye here or around the teeth or whatnot. So it's a push-pull process. Dry media is silver point, or this is when you put a soft metal into a receptacle and it can leave a mark. We'll see a drawing with that in a little bit. Wet media is brush drawing, or it's pen and ink. Sometimes watercolor can be considered wet media as well. Paper making. Paper starts in the 1st century CE. Papyrus and cloth, wood, animal hide, even like stone walls were used before paper was invented. Paper comes in 1 CE by a court official of the Han Dynasty, Kai Lun. He pounded macerated plant fibers and then he suspended them in water until they would bind, and then he would scoop them up. So when it would dry, this paper pulp would stick together. Paper comes in different sheets, so you can get rough where you have a up and down and creates a texture. You can have a semi-tooth, a smooth tooth that's good for illustration, then an ultra smooth for mechanical pencils. So the surface and weight of a texture means a lot to the artist. If a paper has a heavy weight, then that means it's a thick paper that can hold a lot of media, or a thin paper like tracing paper can not hold very much. If you ever heard the word ream, a ream is 500 sheets. German artist Kath Kollwitz did lots of self-portraits in charcoal. As you can see, it's dramatic and spontaneous. They have a gestural energy to them. They're somewhat abstracted. In German Expressionism, there's a lot of deep shadows and jagged edges, frantic movement. You see it scribbled in there. Very beautiful work. Kathy Kollwitz was one of the first women that taught at an academy, at a very prestigious academy in Germany. But during World War II, when Hitler came to power, he removed her from being a teacher because he didn't want a woman to be a teacher at their academy. So her paintings actually got more morose as she got older. Another great contemporary charcoal artist is Shelby Shadwell, and there's a video for you to watch on his process there. He's out of University of Wyoming, teaches up there, and he makes portraits of cockroaches, a lot of trash bags, and baby diapers. You'll have to watch the video. It's pretty cool to see how he works at such a big scale. Here's Raphael's head of a Virgin and Child. This is made with silver point. Silver point is very light. It's actually metal that you draw with, and it darkens over time. But in Raphael's head of the Virgin and Child, he puts a bone ash ground, and then he takes his silver point and draws into it with cross hatching. So it's a very, very fine point. And as you can see in here, you use just lines next to each other, as we talked about earlier when we did contrast and value. And opposed to shading it, you just use your hatches to create this effect of value. Albach Dürer, a German artist from the 1500s, also uses this. This is all on a colored background. He uses white to color in some of the highlights, but then it's all cross-hatched work in the rest of the drawing. You can see more of it here. And this is a common technique you'll see in etching too. When you etch into a board, you can create these cross-hatching. This is another Albach Dürer 1506, and these are praying hands. Michelangelo, in this study for the Libyan Sibyl, uses chalk, pastel, and crayon. So that's pigment and binder, gum arabic and glue. And you notice the pressure that he puts on that big toe. He was very obsessed with that big toe because he wanted to have it rendered just right so that it appeared as if the Sibyl was turning. Michelangelo was obsessed with anatomy and did tons and tons of these Conti drawings to refine the body in preparation for his Sistine Chapel ceiling paintings. George Seurat, this is the plowing. One of the best examples in this one is that it's basically a lineless drawing. So it's all the edges in it are just sort of fuzzy edges. This is a way to create a scene objectivity without having distinct lines, but by just having a fuzzy, soft value change. Edgar Degas uses pastel, which is another form of dry media. It's pigment and binder, but it's very colorful. The thing about pastel is that the colors are very vibrant and saturated, and you can be quick with it. As you can see, he's very gestural. Degas did a whole series of ballerinas that he drew from life, and then he made them into these pastel works where the colors are very bold and beautifully rendered. Raphael, cartoon for the School of Athens. This is charcoal and chalk. So when using drawing for a preparatory sketch, this is what Raphael did for the School of Athens. He made a lot of preliminary drawings and he refined them. The cartoon is how he transferred this drawing to here. And what they mean by a cartoon is they took the drawing and they would pin it to the wall and then poke little tiny holes into all the major lines that he needed to follow. Then they would blow chalk through them. And when you pulled the drawing off, you would have a map of where everything should be, and then you could retrace it and then make the painting. So it was a technique that helped them to transfer a drawing onto a large-scale painting. This is an enormous painting on the wall in Vatican. It's the School of Athens. All the philosophers from ancient Greece are contained in it. Here's Robert Rauschenberg. We spoke about this one, but sometimes drawing can be erasing. And in this piece, Robert Rauschenberg borrows a drawing from Willem de Kooning, and then he erases it in making a statement about erasing the past opposed to doing anything new. So Willem de Kooning was a very famous painter at that time, so destroying one of his works made way for a new generation. William Kentridge has this amazing video that you need to watch about, it's all made from erasing. So he films himself drawing and erasing, but it becomes an animation piece that's incredible. He's a South African artist, and he makes most of his art centers on apartheid and racial injustice in the country. These are portraits done on the backs of ledgers, bringing together the mechanicalness of the bureaucracy in South Africa and the personal portrait on top of it. Inks, pigments, dyes, and solvents, surfactants, carbon ink, soot, water, gum. These are what they used 2,500 years ago. Gull ink, that's parasitic growths on trees, and iron sulfate gum arabic. But now they just have ink has pigments, dyes, and solvents, and surfactants. This is Wu Zhen, leaf from an album of bamboo drawings, 1350. Ink and wash is used in this piece to create a masterpiece of simplicity. This finely planned design contains carefully controlled brush strokes as well as loose, freer ink applications, thereby bringing the two opposing influences and reflecting the central principle of Taoism, a belief in the importance of balanced opposites. Because the artist uses only a few shapes, the arrangement of the bamboo leaves becomes like a series of letters in a word or sentence. Wu achieves the changing dark and light values by adding water to create a wash and lighten the ink. This work was intended as a model for Wu's son to follow as he learned the art of brushwork from his father. Brushwork is very important in Chinese art. Zhang Chenghong has utilized both charcoal and graphite for dramatic effect in the work Life Strands. So the deep, dark values that you can get from charcoal get built up to create these strands of hair and the braided interlocking strands that fall down in a gestural mess. The strand may metaphorically represent the passage of time, full hair of childhood to be as it grays down at the end. And this drawing also references the long Chinese scroll, which is supposed to parallel between life and art. Vincent van Gogh uses pen and ink to make this gestural drawing from life. So in life drawing, he's observing directly, and this is one of the things that Van Gogh is mostly known for. He would observe directly what he was drawing. Here's a courtyard that he drew, all this beautiful strokes that he used, like a reed pen that he would dip and make these dots. He was able to get thin and thick ones. This is a pencil drawing that he did from life of a man. It's called At Eternity's Gates. It's a beautiful depiction of sorrow and frustration, despair. This is Van Gogh's Postman. So got the big thick beard, beautiful cross hatching in the background going different directions. And then gestural drawing. This is Alberto Giacometti. He paints and draws gesturally. So again, he's working from life, but he's painting even looser and more frantic and intuitive than Van Gogh. He just draws the impression of a hand or the impression of a still life. These are bottles and fruits. So it's identifying and reacting to the main visual and expressive characteristics of a form. The changing subjects and situations, the energy and dynamics of the movement. Also, contour drawing aims to register the essential qualities of three-dimensional form by rendering an edge or contouring of an object. Artists use contour drawing to strengthen their eye-hand coordination and gain an intimate understanding of form. Contour drawing can help an artist to identify the changing planes that make up a surface of a three-dimensional object. Egon Schiele is one of the masters of contour drawing. They say that he was able to draw essentially without mistake. His eye-hand coordination was so accurate that he could draw almost exactly what he wanted to in the contours. Schiele died at a very young age. He was in his 20s, and he died in the 1918 pandemic. Well, when he was making these kind of drawings, it was quite radical, and he was actually imprisoned for marrying his cousin. Julie Merdu is an artist that creates large-scale abstract drawings. They have motion, they have line, they have all kinds of gestural energy, and they're made on a huge, enormous scale, non-objective, so abstract drawing. Drawing is used a lot in architecture as well. In the old school way, you would have to actually draw out the blueprints. I still have the blueprints to my parents' house. Frank Lloyd Wright actually drew his masterpiece building, they say. He drew it in about 2 hours while the clients were driving to meet about the project that they hired him to do. He had procrastinated for about 3 weeks, but when the pressure was on, he was able to get it done in the time it took them to drive from Chicago to his studio in Wisconsin. Now there's AutoCAD, so a lot of drawing can be done through digital programs, and you can make a lot of shortcuts with that. Straight lines, perfect measurements. Architecture can be democratized. Everyone can design their own building in these programs now. Sid Mead was a legendary concept artist and incredible at drawing and using gouache. He worked on movies like Blade Runner, Alien, Star Trek, Tron, and many others. He did all of his work by hand and colored it with gouache, which is pretty insane to think about. So he is responsible for a lot of the science fiction that we see, the design and style of science fiction that we see. Blade Runner, they're just incredible to think they all came out of his imagination. When he was on his deathbed, he told his partner that they in parentheses, were calling him back. So maybe aliens were beaming down these images to him. Comic books, of course, are sequential, meaning they move in a pattern that tells a story, as we talked about with time. There's penciling, there's inking, and there's coloring. And there's people that do all these different aspects of it, or used to. Now, when you do them, you can do them all on a digital device as well. Frank Miller is a very famous comic book artist, made Sin City, 300, Dark Knight Returns. Marjane Satrapi made Persepolis, about women in Iran. What really is drawing? Drawing may just be a line at its most simple form. Now we see people drawing in space. So Richard Long, his drawing was walking. He would walk out a line, and that would be the way that he would make his drawing. Or he would draw with mud. Michael Heinzer would ride his motorcycle in circles, creating giant, large-scale circular drawings in the desert. So drawing, that doesn't necessarily have to be on paper, but it can be just a line in space. And lastly, James Castle, 1899 to 1977. He lived in Garden Valley, rural part of Idaho, and he actually mixed his own paper. He made his own paper. He mixed his own soot and ink using saliva and a wood stove. He made his own tools by sharpening sticks and other found objects. And he drew all the interiors and different buildings that were around him. There's a website, you can look at some of the different drawings he did, but he really had no concept of art or really what he was doing, and he made everything from hand, which is pretty impressive to think about. It's hard to make drawing tools, and a lot of times we think about drawing and art materials in general as something that just sort of magically gets brought to us or you just buy in the store, but it does need to be made, and at some point everybody had to make all those pencils and charcoal. Especially in the pre-industrial days, you'd have to make them in small batches. So that's drawing. Thanks for paying attention, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye.